Hey, what's happening everybody? Dom here from Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals. Welcome back to the channel. So in this week's video, we're going to be checking out this neat little Nikon camera with a vintage twist, the Nikon Z FC. So I've had the pleasure of shooting on the Z FC and a couple of these DX Nikon crop factor lenses over the past couple of days. And I want to A, share my experience with you all, but more importantly, B, share my opinion of who I think this camera is for, because it's not for everybody. So let's jump right into this and talk about this camera on the physical level. And let's first chat about the design. Nikon clearly went in the vintage direction with the design of the ZFC, which is modeled just like an old 35mm Nikon SLR. The body has a powdered silver finish on the top and bottom, where the whole middle section here is just a black strip with a faux leather grip material that wraps around the whole body. Again, reminiscent of older 35mm cameras that have mechanisms for winding film throughout the body, which would have taken place all inside this black part here. But what really drives home the vintage look on the ZFC are these physical top dials for ISO, shutter speed, and exposure comp. You get a little digital f-stop display here, which is cute. And of course, this top prism here, also reminiscent of the SLR build. But to me, the real charm of the ZFC comes after you use it for a little bit and you sort of discover that it has all of those new age mirrorless techie features that are like just underneath the surface there behind its vintage design. So pretty cool. Like this articulating touchscreen LCD that just flips right back in to look all filmy again. Also that really sharp electronic EVF inside that prism style viewfinder. And other little subtle reminders too, like a video record button, USB microphone and HDMI inputs on the left side here, and little Wi-Fi and Bluetooth symbols on the right side here, where the hinge for the film door would have gone on a 35mm camera. And last and most obviously, you take the lens off and here's your dead giveaway that this camera is not from the age of emulsion, but we've got mirrorless digital sensor tech in here. The ZFC has a 20.9 megapixel CMOS sensor that is APS-C sized, not full frame, and the ZFC features the Nikon Z mirrorless lens mount. But given that crop factor, only Nikon's DX lenses focal lengths will read true on this camera. Other Nikon Z mount optics will fit on the camera, but will be cropped in, of course. And I'm going to chat briefly about these DX lenses in a sec. That sensor is pretty much the exact same sensor as its crop factor sibling, the Z50, with a couple of minor tweaks. The ZFC is capable of full-time autofocus in video mode, so I guess that's just like more of a programming thing. But like the Z50, it takes oversampled 4K video up to 30 frames per second using just about the entire area of that image sensor. It can also take stills at up to 11 frames per second in JPEG and 9 frames per second shooting RAW, and that's a 14-bit RAW file. The ZFC takes one UHD Type 1 SD card, which kind of tells you right there that fast write speeds aren't really going to be this camera's thing. Also, that card shares the same space as the battery on the bottom, which is a more obscure Nikon battery, the ENEL25, which does a fine job of powering the camera. Not great, just fine. I gotta say though, there are a few things I don't love about the build and handling experience of the ZFC. It feels quite a bit less robust than Nikon's professional mirrorless line, and certainly less robust than an old Nikon 35mm camera. It is pretty well constructed, but the response of these buttons and top dials aren't the best. They're a little loose, on the border of cheap feeling, like they've got nothing on most Fuji cameras, which are effectively trying to go for the same thing. The ZFC certainly feels lightweight, definitely no problem with weight there, but that might be working against it here because it has sort of a creaky, almost hollow, dare I say plasticky kind of feel that doesn't exactly give me the durable, they just don't make them like they used to kind of vibe. Also, the ZFC is quite hard to grip. It's a small camera body, which is already going to be harder to handle, but it also has absolutely nothing helping you out with gripping this camera. Nothing for your fingers up here to hook onto, no thumb rest in the back. I found myself using my thumb to grip this cutout for the LCD here when shooting on this camera, but that was kind of awkward, and my fingers kept wanting to grip onto this custom function button on the front here, which was also awkward. Other than that though, the shooting experience from the ZFC can definitely be a fun one, don't get me wrong. And yes, obviously, if you're comparing it to a more professional Nikon mirrorless camera like a Z6 or a Z7 Mark I or II, it's obviously going to have some shortcomings in terms of burst shooting, battery life, a lot of those professional tools, and just, of course, that beautiful full-frame look. But I thought the images looked very good coming out of the ZFC. You're getting 14-bit RAWs out of here if you want that have a great amount of latitude, especially in shadow recovery. And in JPEG, I find Nikon's picture profiles to be suitable for most environments. I especially like how they represent green straight out of camera. And I think this camera might be getting a lot of help from these Nikon DX lenses, which I'm surprised by. These lenses, like the ZFC body actually, are manufactured in a much more cost-efficient way, as a salesman would put it. They all do this telescoping twist to unlock sort of thing, and on the lens mount, the flange is all plastic. No metal in there like the full frame Z series lenses, and also no gasket here for weather sealing. Yet, optically, I think these DX lenses hold up pretty well. They're generally pretty sharp, contrasty, focus quickly, and also pretty silently considering there's probably not much tech going on there in the autofocus motors. And also the manual focus response is also pretty good. They're focused by wire lenses, so they're going to use those autofocus motors to manually focus. Where I think this camera really gets an unexpected appeal though is in its video capabilities. That upscaled 4K video actually looks pretty dang good with enough light. And the full-time eye detection and autofocus in video was really nailing it. There is no in-body image stabilization in this camera, which is a bummer, but it does offer electronic IS in video mode, which works fairly well. And this is hilarious and easily my favorite part about this camera, but you got your kit zoom lens on at 16 millimeters, flip out your articulating screen to face you, you're in video mode, and boom, now you're vlogging on what otherwise looks like an old 35mm stills camera. So it's just silly goose stuff right there. And this vlog footage actually looks really good, but remember what I said about that lack of grip on this camera. It is kind of awkward to do this, just holding the body like that. Maybe you want to hold it by the lens like that, but that can be awkward too. Alright, so having considered all that we've talked about in this video about the Nikon ZFC, I want to go back to that initial question that I asked in the beginning of this video. That is, who is this camera for? But that kind of reminds me that I have like a pre-question to that question, like a preliminary question, and that is, why not just get a Fuji? To me, when I first saw this camera, I said, cool, Nikon is trying to take a stab at the vintage film nostalgia feel for a new mirrorless camera. The concept modern Fuji cameras are pretty much built around. Cameras like the X-T4 and smaller X-T30 that also utilize the APS-C sized imager. So my initial response to this thing was like, yeah, but why not just get a Fuji? Come on. Well, the Fuji X-T30, which I'd say is probably the most comparable to this body, is still quite a bit more expensive than the ZFC. You can actually get the Nikon FC and kit lens right here for less than just the X-T30 body. Or maybe price isn't really the issue and you're just a Nikon lover who's already got Nikon Z mount glass or maybe Nikon F mount glass and are planning to adapt and just want a more fun vintage style camera to shoot on every once in a while. And now I'm encroaching on that initial question of who I think this camera is for. So I guess I just found one answer, and it might be the Nikon shooter who already owns Nikon lenses but wants the ZFC for a more nostalgic film feel and that lens compatibility. But primarily, I think the ZFC would be an excellent camera for an amateur photographer who wants to learn and explore their eye for photography on a fun and stylish camera. And that's backed up by having all of the tools in there, I think, to create a great image. Additionally, these manual top dials up here might actually help an amateur photographer who's still learning how all of those exposure tools affect the image. And at less than $1,000 for the ZFC body, that definitely puts it in the first real camera territory for a lot of people. And then maybe once they improve, they'll move on to another camera system, or maybe not. The concept of the ZFC is pretty awesome in that way. Nikon knew that they weren't going to be blowing anybody away by the performance of the ZFC. They just understand that the vintage look and the nostalgia of the film experience is important to some people. Alright everybody, so that's pretty much gonna do it on this video, talking about this neat and vintage Nikon Z FC. So as always, if you have any questions about the Z FC or any of these Nikon DX lenses, you know what to do. Drop a comment in the comment section below and we'll start a discussion. Also, if you happen to like this video, you can hit it with that little thumbs up button down there to let me know you liked it. And if you're not already, for whatever reason, subscribe to the channel. And if you are subscribed, you can hit that little bell button down there to be notified whenever we post new content, which is every week. So keep it vintage, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one.